So today we're gonna make some homemade focaccia. I love focaccia, especially with extra salt on it. So easy recipe, so easy. The most time consuming part about it is letting it rise. So we have 2 cups of flour. We have a cup of lukewarm water. We have 2½ teaspoons of active dry yeast, very important for the rising aspect. And then we have about a teaspoon and a half of salt. It's up to you. I like a lot of salt, so I got about 2 teaspoons here. A little bit of olive oil, and we're ready to start. So the most important part of this for the rising process is to start with the yeast. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the 2½ teaspoons of yeast into the bowl. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add the 1 cup of lukewarm water. So we're going to pour this into the yeast. There we go. And what we're going to do at this point is we're going to whisk it together. We gotta get this nice and thick. So we're going to go ahead and whisk the yeast together. We're going to go ahead and add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now you could add about 1 or 3 tablespoons. I go for 2 because it gives a little bit of flavor. So right to the yeast mixture here, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, which gives it delicious flavor. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the salt. The salt will give it a kick, which is my favorite. So just go ahead and whisk the salt right in here. This is so easy. It's such an easy recipe to make. Now, I've whisked it with a whisk here. This is really important. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the flour, we're going to add a cup at a time. But we're going to start with whisking, then we're going to stir it afterwards because it gets pretty thick. So we got that all whisked together. Look how beautiful that is. Now we're going to add 1 cup of flour. I'm going to keep whisking. It's going to come like a thick paste. So go ahead and make sure this is all whisked together. So add about a cup first. Let it get a little thick. So now it's nice and creamy. So now what's really important, I'm going to switch from my whisk to my spoon because you need to stir it with a spoon because it gets pretty thick. So let's go ahead and add the last cup of flour into here. We're going to add that in there really nice. And now you're going to see where it gets really thick. So we're going to stir it together. You start to see how it's forming. Look at that. Perfect. Coming together really well. Make sure you get all the flour from the sides, and it's going to be kind of like doughy, and it's really wet because what's going to dry it out is when we start to knead it on the cutting board. So basically make sure you get all the flour mixed into the dough. And look at that, it's nice and thick and we're ready to knead it. Now get ready to get your hands messy. So what we're going to do is we're getting ready to knead the focaccia, but what we want to do is take a cutting board or a very dry surface. Make sure you add a generous amount of flour. So basically make sure you get a lot of flour on here. Get your hands together, get them ready for the dough because the dough is very sticky at this point. What we're going to do is we're going to add the dough right to this flour mixture that's on the surface, and see how sticky that is? This is the part that's a little tricky. This is where you're going to get your hands messy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I get my hands nice and floury because this is very sticky dough right now. Get a lot of flour on there. It's okay to sprinkle a little bit on the dough, and there we go. We're going to start managing it, putting it together, getting it to firm up, which you can see it's not that sticky anymore because of the flour. And we're going to go ahead and knead this for about, I would say 3 minutes. And that's what you want. You want it to feel velvety. If it's still really sticky to you, just add a little bit more flour. It will work with your hands. Not a big deal. Look at that. Beautiful dough. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let this rise, but I'm going to leave my cutting board here because we need to use the flour afterwards to knead it right before we cook it. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just get a little bit of flour on here so it's manageable. I'm going to take the bowl that we had, and what we're going to do is we are going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil into the bowl. So you're going to take your dough. This is perfect. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put it in the bowl. And all we're going to do is we're kind of just move it around the olive oil a little bit. It's okay if it's wet. It's going to absorb. I just like to cover it with some olive oil, which gives it a lot of flavor also. It's so delicious. And now, since it's covered really nice, what we're going to do is I'm going to cover this with a towel. I'm going to put it in a warm, dry space for about 1.5 hours, and it's going to rise double in bulk. So the focaccia has been rising second time around for about a half an hour. You can see it's double in size. Oh, it's so beautiful. So what we're going to do here, very simple. We're going to take our little finger and we're just going to poke it down. We're going to poke some holes in here. These holes are going to actually hold the olive oil and some salt to give it a little bit of flavor. Now keep in mind, you can put some herbs in here if you want, some cilantro, some basil, whatever you want, but I like it plain with salt, delicious. So go ahead and poke each side down, each pan. Then what we're going to do, we've got your little fingerprints in there. We are going to take some olive oil and we're just going to go ahead and brush it. Very simple, just be very generous and brush it on here because this is the flavor right here. So go ahead and preheat your oven to at least 425 to 450. We're going to pop this in. It takes about 10 minutes. You can tell when it's done. So now I'm going to pull out the focaccia out of the oven. We're just about done. Perfect. See how it's a little brown? You can see the olive oil kind of like oozing out there. We're just going to go ahead and pull these out of the oven. Brown and beautiful. And I'm going to show you how easy it is just to scoop these out of the pan. So what we're going to do, just take a butter knife and very simply they just fall right out. Look how easy that is. Easy, delicious, smells wonderful. We have some homemade focaccia here. How amazing is that? Go ahead and cut it up and dip it in some olive oil.